Th, that's a corpse, dead by hanging, yes. Is this the first time you've seen one? Why yes, what is it? What is that thing? I told you it's a corpse, it's a dead body. How can you be so calm about it? Young Junji was all out of sorts, but for Lahan a human corpse was nothing especially remarkable. The more people there were, the more corpses there would be. That was all. The capital and its surrounding environs had some 1 million official family registers, although in Lahan's mind, that number had to be considered no more than an estimate. Taxes were levied based on the adult population, so people sometimes lied to dodge the taxman. They said they had no children when they did, or claimed their children had died before adulthood when they hadn't, or reported a man as a woman. Some families probably also forgot to submit death reports, but no doubt there were far more people out there who were off the registers. The court and the rear palace between them had tens of thousands of people, a significant population. The more people there were, the more chances there would be to see a dead one. If they were rarely found, in the worst-case scenario that was because people were successfully hiding them. Among the soldiers, it wasn't uncommon for someone to be hit in the wrong place during practice and die from it. There had been 3 recorded cases of this happening in the last year. 18 people had survived, but they were so badly injured they couldn't continue in the military. Not a large number as numbers went, but one had to assume there were other unreported cases. Then there were the bureaucrats, some of whom inevitably found themselves so hemmed in by work that they took their own lives. 7 cases last year, as I recall, Lahan said as he stood and studied the dangling body. This corpse, however, did not belong to a bureaucrat. It was wearing a soldier's uniform. Why, there's one of those rain go away dolls in here. Why, that's the biggest one I've ever seen. Honored father, that's a human corpse. As usual, Lahan couldn't be quite sure whether Lakan was joking or not. Young Junji, unable to bear the sight any longer, had turned away and was covering his mouth. That would be the ordinary reaction. Lahan admittedly wasn't eager to smell the filth the body had expelled, so he covered his nose with a handkerchief. What would you like to do, Master Lakan? Onsu asked. I can have the room cleaned up immediately, or else you can do your work in a different place today. If you can clean it up nice and quick, then I'm perfectly fine here. You may be, father, but I'm not so sure about everyone else. Lahan did not consider a dead body to be a beautiful thing. It was a thing once its life functions had ended. It was a person no longer. Besides, with time it would rot, and rotting was not very good for purity or cleanliness. So in Lahan's opinion it was not beautiful. This room gets good sunlight, Lakan said firmly. It was still the cold season, and it was crucial to Lakan that he have somewhere warm so he could take a nap. The whole gaggle of onlookers was watching Lahan and his group now. There were 17 soldiers, 10 civil officials, and 3 palace ladies gawking. By the way, who is this person? Lahan adjusted his glasses and squinted at the man. He wasn't keen to study the corpse too closely, but it was necessary to establish the deceased's identity. Lahan didn't see much prospect of getting his work done today. He's a soldier Master Lakan brought into his fold about 2 years ago, Onsu said. Master Lakan described him as a lance, I believe. This is our turncoat then. Indeed. I have a record of his service I can give you, although it's more than a year old. So this was the lance that Lahan had captured on the shogi board that morning. Lahan had known and told Lakan that the lance had been taken by a hostile faction, but he hadn't known the lance's face. Remembering people's faces wasn't Lahan's job, it was Rikusen's, and he just decided to kill himself in my father's office, Lahan mused. He looked around the room. The lance was dangling from a beam in the very middle of the office. The office had been given particularly high ceilings with a few good sturdy rafters after Lakan had expressed the desire to have a hammock. However, he was so decidedly unathletic that he couldn't actually get in the hammock. It was a pointless story of a pointless endeavour, except that the other offices were not built such that one could have hanged oneself in the middle of the room. Not far from the waste that had gathered under the body lay a toppled chair. Perhaps the man had kicked it over. Lakan's office appeared to have been left undisturbed in his absence. It had been cleaned, but in a cursory manner. Lakan's beloved couch had been dusted, for example, but the cobwebs on the bookshelves had not been attended to. Lahan inspected the rope hanging from the rafters, the lance hanging from the rope, and the overturned chair. Father, is the culprit who killed this lance the man dangling from the rafters here with us? My Lakan indicated the onlookers with a jerk of his chin. What? Young Junji looked at the crowd, shock written on his face. What does that mean? Keep your voice down if you please. We don't want the criminal to notice us. Lahan tried to be gentle in his reproof of young Junji. He wasn't in the habit of wearing kid gloves with men, but when it came to a boy who had been dragged here by accident due to a case of mistaken identity involving Lahan's own elder brother, sparing a bit of decency seemed the least he could do. Young Junji clapped his hands over his mouth. Obedient children were so much easier to work with. Who is it? Lahan asked Lakan. White ghost stone. The culprit might appear as a ghost stone to Lakan, but Lahan couldn't tell them apart. He narrowed his eyes. Ah, the crowd was dispersing, meaning the killer was going to disappear, but Onsu seemed to have figured it out. He wasn't quite as good with faces as Rikusen had been, but they were still his specialty. Sir Onsu, Lahan turned to him, thinking this was a lot of trouble. Sir Lahan, are you thinking of abandoning me to handle this on my own while you go do your work? Onsu placed a hand firmly on Lahan's shoulder and gave him a nasty smile. He was a soldier and his grip was strong enough to hurt. Lahan let out a breath, considering what to do, and looked at Lakan. I wanna sleep, Lakan said. But first I wanna go see Maomao. Lakan's brain was built in a way that was unfathomable to the average person. He could solve problems without using numbers or formulae, but nobody knew how he reached his conclusions. However accurate his accusations might be, making them stick without further proof would be a tall order. Ahem, Lahan flagged down a nearby lower official. Kindly go to the medical office and tell them we need to investigate an unusual corpse. Those are the words you are to use. Do not tell them it is a hanging corpse. It is an unusual corpse, sir. Yes, and make sure you get it right. Also, since the medical apprentices are finally back at work, could you have them come as well? I suspect the medical personnel will leap at the chance to study a fresh body. This was all Lahan's very indirect way of telling him to bring Maomao. Absolute certainty was impossible, but he figured there was at least an 80% chance that she would come. That ought to help the otherwise listless Lakan muster some motivation. Lakan would give them their answer, but an answer alone wouldn't be enough. He would tell them who the killer was, but it would be up to Lahan and the others to figure out the motive and the manner of death. Both were Maomao's specialties. Lahan made sure his glasses were perched firmly on his nose, and then he sighed. He was going to have to spend a long time looking at something very unbeautiful. Chapter 3, Lahan and the Dangling Corpse Part 2. When Lahan saw his little sister for the first time in almost a year, she was not looking very happy. It turned out there hadn't been any need for Sanfan to write a letter specifically to summon her. Hello, little sister. The very first words out of Maomao's mouth were scram abacus specs. Ma-yo. Lakan was right beside her and tried to give her a hug, but she jammed a broom handle into his cheek to hold him at a safe distance. Lahan was mystified about where she had gotten that broom. Maomao, perhaps you could show a modicum of compassion for him. Would you in my place? Absolutely not. With that, Lahan turned to the two people who had accompanied Maomao. One was Dr. Liu, the head official for medical matters at court. He was a man of stern mien of the same generation as Lahan's granduncle Liu Men. The other was a much younger man of average build and with a less than serious look on his face. So where's this dead body? The young man asked. He looked inordinately interested, and Dr. Liu promptly rapped him on the head with a knuckle. That's enough out of you, Tianyu, the doctor said. Tianyu, so that was his name. Lahan did not particularly care about this information. It seemed Maomao had been accompanied by another troublemaker. However, this troublemaker gave Lahan a good opportunity to discuss the matter at hand, so he let it pass. If Lakan tried anything funny, Lahan could simply foist him on Maomao. He did not doubt Maomao was having the same thought about him. I'm not made of free time, Dr. Liu said. Perhaps you would kindly show us the body. I expect the Moon Prince to give a report on our return this afternoon. I do not have time to dally. It was clear he was quietly angry. The report from the expedition to the western capital also concerned Lakan. Lahan was as eager as the good doctor to get this over with. This way, please, Onsu said, leading them into the room. They had decided to wait somewhere other than the office, as the situation was clearly too much for young Junji. He was a dedicated boy, though, and had asked if there was anything he could do. So Lahan set him to cleaning another room that Lakan sometimes used. It was stuffed full of junk Lakan had piled up there, the way a dog might collect slippers. If you'll pardon my saying so, the La seemed to go rather too easy on their own relations, Dr. Liu said, looking at Lakan, Maomao, and then Lahan. What's wrong with being smitten with my own daughter? Lakan answered as if this were a perfectly ordinary conversation. You could lead a horse to a charged room, but you couldn't make him read it. Dr. Liu was no fool. He had to know that nothing he said to Lacan would make any difference. He walked casually into the office. "This is our man?" he asked. The lance was still dangling from the ceiling. Lahan had given instructions that the body not be taken down. Can't get a very good look at him like this. Dr. Liu narrowed his eyes, but the man called Tianyu was downright excited. "Wow, he's dead. He's dead all right. You said the body was unusual, but it's just a hanging," Maomao muttered. She probably thought she had said it silently, but her thoughts frequently came out of her mouth in spite of herself. Lahan had instructed the messenger to say the body was unusual. This implied the cause of death was unknown, which made it conceivable that poison was involved. If he had said it was a hanging in so many words, Maomao would never have been interested. Lahan knew very well that Maomao would be loath to come to his office. He had to manufacture a reason for her to come. "You found him hanging here. Doesn't that pretty much make it a suicide?" Tianyu asked. He was rewarded with another knuckle from Dr. Liu. "Investigate, don't jump to conclusions based on the first thing you see. Making assumptions will only skew your judgment." He sounded a lot like Maomao's granduncle Liumen. "I presume the fact that you've left the scene undisturbed implies you have some reason to believe this wasn't a suicide." Dr. Liu was already studying the body. "That's right, Sir," Onsu said, answering on behalf of Lacan. It was more appropriate for him to handle this conversation than for Lahan to do all the talking. If it were a suicide, it would create a contradiction. What kind of contradiction? Onsu answered the doctor's question by presenting a piece of rope. "We cut this piece of rope to match the one around the man's neck, Wang Fang's neck. We wanted to compare it with the distance from the toppled chair. We wanted to see if it would have been possible for him to hang himself. If a person was going to hang themselves, they had to be able to get the noose within about 30 centimeters of the chair. Otherwise, they'd never be able to get their neck through it, no matter how they stretched and strained." To Lahan's eyes, the world was overflowing with numbers. This contradiction was not beautiful. "If he kicked the chair over as he jumped, then this doesn't make sense," Tianyu offered. Lahan answered in lieu of Onsu. "The chair is lying with the backrest up. It would have to have spun 180 degrees as it fell to end up like this. It would be very hard to hang yourself facing toward the backrest." Maomao was quiet, perhaps because Tianyu was being so loud. She continued to try to keep her distance from Lacan, who was holding out a snack. Maomao was sniffing dubiously. "HRM, I take it you didn't let the body down because there's something you wanted me to double-check," Dr. Liu said. "Precisely," replied Onsu. "And the chair hasn't been moved. Would you like me to call one of the onlookers to testify?" Dr. Liu, it seemed, was a man who liked to be clear about things. He was suspicious where suspicion was warranted. He looked like he could be a hard man, but he didn't seem the type to bend the truth, so Lahan didn't dislike him. "I must say, I'm surprised you felt the need to come yourself," Dr. Liu said. Onsu, who apparently had hoped for some more junior medical personnel. His polite smile caused his right cheek to rise exactly 3 millimeters. "It was the way you said to send the apprentices. They need someone to oversee them, don't they?" In other words, he wanted to make sure his people couldn't be part of any cover-up. "All right, bring down the body if you would." "Certainly." On summoned a subordinate and instructed him to lower the body to the ground. "If you would all be so kind as to have a seat and wait." "Don't mind if I do," Tianyu said, promptly claiming a spot on the couch. "I'm happy to stand," Dr. Liu said. "Me too," said Maomao, and the two of them did just that. Even given that the rope holding the body up was cut before the body was fully on the floor, it was difficult work. The lance, Wang Fang, had been a military man and built like one. His corpse was quite a heavy load. According to the report, Wang Fang had first been spotted by Lacan 2 years before. Lacan, being an excellent judge of people and quick to act, soon hired him. The man was practically made for battle, and took care of the job Lacan assigned him in lieu of a test with no trouble at all. The report noted that Wang Fang was ambitious to the point of greed, but suggested that with proper oversight it shouldn't be a problem. Perhaps it wouldn't have been, but with Lacan gone, Wang Fang hadn't had that oversight. "Finally got him down," Dr. Liu remarked. The body was laid out on a cloth, and it was so unbeautiful that Lahan wished he could avert his eyes. The skin, which had been supple in life, was now bluish and pale, and fluid seeped from the body's various holes. "Tianyu." "Yes, sir." Dr. Liu was telling the young man to take the first look. Maomao positioned herself behind Tianyu and peeked at the body. "What do you think?" the doctor asked. "You can see fingernail marks on his neck. They show he fought the rope trying to escape." Tianyu looked surprisingly serious. He might have seemed a frivolous person, but apparently he really was a physician. Maomao nodded and also looked at the body. I'd say he suffered, I'd say he did. Doesn't one usually suffer when one is hanged by the neck? Onsu asked, perplexed by their exchange. It was Dr. Liu who answered. If you drop with enough force, the joints of the neck dislocate and you lose consciousness. In that case you wouldn't struggle, so it's an easy death, said Onsu. Not necessarily. Get it wrong and it will be very unpleasant. I can't recommend it. At that Onsu gave a pained smile. Dr. Liu continued, all right, take off his clothes. Yes, sir. Tianyu began to strip the body. Maomao helped. What's this, you're helping? Lahan asked. From what he remembered, Maomao was under Liu Men's strict instructions not to touch a dead body, because this is work. I have my old man's permission, she said. She showed no sign of fear as she removed the clothing from the corpse. Lahan wasn't sure how he felt about the fact that his little sister seemed so used to stripping a male body bare, even if this one was dead. Maomao, don't touch something so filthy, said Lahan. He was one to talk, he was covered in snacks. Lahan was almost impressed that he could eat in the presence of a dead man. From the liver mortis on the feet, I'd say this guy has been dead a long time. How long would you say, Yang? At least half a day, certainly. The reddening of the lower body is quite acute. Tianyu plucked at the skin. And from the toughness of the flesh, I'd say not more than 16 hours ago. Dr. Liu didn't say anything, so he evidently agreed. Even granting a margin of error, he would have died sometime in the evening or night. Lahan touched his spectacles. What had this man been doing here so long after work hours? Do you believe he died from the hanging? He asked. Tianyu replied. Again Dr. Liu didn't contradict him. Do you think you can say whether it was suicide or homicide? Onsu asked. I can't tell that for sure. Like I said, the position of the chair makes me think he didn't do this to himself, but I don't think I could say for certain. This time, Dr. Liu actually nodded. Maomao squinted up at the rafter overhead. What's the matter, little sister? Asked Lahan. She didn't answer, but she stomped on his toes. Unfortunately for her, he had packed material into the toes of his shoes, which blunted the impact. What's the matter? He asked again. I was just looking at the rope up there. I think it's tied like a lasso, that way you wouldn't have to use a ladder. A lasso, maybe it would be quicker to show you. Maomao glanced at Dr. Liu for permission. He might get angry if she just started doing things on her own. It was Onsu who gave her the go-ahead. Do please show us if you would. Is there anything you'll need? A rope similar to the one used in the hanging. And if you have a rock that can be tied to it, that would be helpful. Maomao hardly listened to anything Lahan had to say, but she seemed relatively pliant with Onsu. Lahan wasn't sure whether Maomao realized it herself, but that preference for put-upon folks bore the distinct sign of Liu Men's influence. If I may then. Maomao took the rope and tied the rock to the end of it, then spun it around before tossing it up. It arced between the beam and the ceiling. And how are you supposed to attach that to a post? Look at the knot on the rope that's up on the beam and you'll get it. You do this. Maomao made a loose loop with the end of the rope and passed the other end through it. Then she said, and pull on this. She cinched the rope tight to the beam. So that's how it works, Lahan said. That's how what works. I was just thinking, if it was homicide, how would they have killed him? The culprit would have been dealing with a powerfully built soldier, not someone who could be easily strangled. What if they were to use the ceiling beam? Then they wouldn't have to have the strength to physically wring his neck. You hang him from the rafters by the neck, then you could kill him without having to be very strong. Not to mention, that would leave no sign of anything but a hanging. Pretty much, although it would still be impossible for someone like me. Maomao gave the rope a tug. She could hardly have weighed half what the dead soldier did. True enough. Even a man like me probably couldn't have managed it. Not for a burly, heavy military man like that. The possible culprits my father indicated hardly seemed like they could have murdered someone so large. Lahan thought of the onlookers that Lakan had been watching. Culprits, you mean the old fart already knows who did it? Maomao immediately scowled. Daddy figured it out right away. Suddenly Lakan was at Maomao's side. She immediately backed up. Eat this, please. She just managed to sound passably polite, but there was nothing polite about the way she grabbed the nearest snack and flung it, like one would for a dog. Lakan went running after it. Don't waste food, Lahan said. He'll eat the whole thing and you know it. Maomao clapped her hands to get the crumbs off them. Well, that takes care of that, she seemed to say. Dr. Liu was looking at her like he had an opinion on all this, but he was loath to stick up for Lakan, so he decided to pretend he hadn't seen anything. If you know who did it, why'd you call a doctor? Maomao asked. My honored father may know who committed the crime, but he can't say why or how. I suppose we know how now. which leaves me wondering what the motive could have been. The motive, right? Maomao glanced toward the couch. You know, more or less, enlighten me, little sister. If it turned out the murder had been arranged by Lacan's subordinates to get back at the traitor, that would be a problem. Lahan hoped they could deal with this as quietly as possible. I don't really want to say, Maomao told him. You have to, or I'm going to be late for the report with the Moon Prince. Maomao didn't look very happy, but she started talking. The motive isn't anything especially profound. The killer was female, yes, excellent guess. Lahan was genuinely impressed. Lacan had said white ghost stone. In general with him, white ghost stones were women and black ones were men. Maomao sniffed. It's very simple, the deceased is a man and the killer was a woman. That's what it boils down to, eh? Aha. Maomao looked down at the now naked body with disinterest. To someone who had grown up in the pleasure district, fraught relationships between men and women were nothing new. If you knew all that, you could have said something, Lahan said, irked by his sister's reticence.